Shadow has had many enemies over the years, some which have had more motivation to target him rather than Sonic. I'm talking about characters like Black Doom and Infinite. There are also enemies such as Dr. Eggman and Metal Sonic, who Shadow has been on much more neutral levels with. In most of these cases, despite all of these characters being evil, Shadow has been able to maintain a calm nature around them, and can often have conversations with them, even showing that he can understand his enemy's way of thinking, something Sonic himself can't do. However, there is one foe who stands out from the crowd regarding Shadow and his relationship with his opponents, and that foe is Mephiles the Dark.
Mephiles time.
On the surface, Mephiles doesn't seem too different from a lot of Shadow's other enemies. Most people would compare him to Black Doom, and yes, the two are very similar. But the difference between them is that Black Doom believes that Shadow owes him his loyalty because he was responsible for bringing him to life, while Mephiles doesn't believe that. Both characters obviously attempt to lure Shadow to join them in their world-destroying quests, and with Black Doom, Shadow does actually show interest in listening to him, and will sometimes choose to side with him completely. With Mephiles, Shadow shows no interest in joining him whatsoever, and quite frankly, there's no reason for him to join him. Perhaps this is because he's learned from his mistake in trusting Black Doom, or it's simply because by the time Shadow meets Mephiles, he has no interest in going down a dark path because he already chose to do good by the end of Sonic Adventure 2. Now then, let's take a look at how Shadow and Mephiles interact with one another at face value before looking into what goes on inside their heads and the symbolism of their relationship. First off, let's look at Shadow. Shadow interacts with Mephiles in a way that is no different to how he acts around everyone else he considers a foe. He is calm and shows no actual passionate hatred. Instead, he just seems intrigued to understand what motivates his foe, and will often ask them questions. In most cases, his questions are answered. Eggman seems more than willing to tell Shadow why he does things. Black Doom willingly shares information because he is confident in his success and also believes Shadow will eventually fight by his side. And Infinite lectures Shadow about his new power because finally he feels like he can talk back to Shadow. Mephiles, on the other hand, never really gives Shadow a direct answer, and even chooses to lie to him. Now, of course, Shadow has been lied to by people like Metal Sonic and Eggman about his past, but those were in situations where Shadow was vulnerable due to his amnesia, and where he was begging for answers about himself, rather than asking questions about his enemy's intentions. Shadow never really seems to fall for Mephiles' lies, because by this point in his own story, Shadow is content with who he is, and he cares more about the world than what happens to himself. He has no interest in listening to Mephiles, and is always able to face him head on, even when he doesn't know how to physically defeat him. Shadow doesn't fear him, and the only reason he is constantly chasing him down is because he is aware that Mephiles is a threat, but also because Mephiles actually has a connection to him more so than with any other character. With that said, let's take a look at Mephiles. When Shadow first meets Mephiles, Mephiles talks to him as if he is an old enemy. This is what initially sparks Shadow's interest in going after him, simply because he wants to find out more. Mephiles tries to use this to his advantage by showing Shadow his future, which, in his mind, should convince Shadow to return to wanting revenge, since in the future, Shadow had been captured by the humans and locked up just like how he was 50 years ago. This doesn't work, so Mephiles just starts trying to kill him, but this then becomes a small, vicious cycle. Mephiles and Shadow talk, Mephiles lies to Shadow in an attempt to get him on his side, Shadow refuses, they fight, and they part ways. Rinse and repeat. But all of this is what's happening on the surface. Now, Shadow doesn't really need to be spoken of at this point because most of his thoughts are made pretty clear just at face value. He wants to stop Mephiles from carrying out whatever evil plan he has, and for a small part of the story, he wants to know why Mephiles is interested in him. Mephiles, on the other hand, isn't quite as obvious as Shadow when it comes to expressing his motives. Like I said before, this secretive nature is what makes Mephiles' relationship with Shadow unique, because he is not just withholding information from Shadow, he is blatantly lying to him. Now then, we all know what Mephiles intends to gain by lying to Shadow: his trust. He wants Shadow to believe that he is trying to save him from being betrayed by the humans. He wants Shadow to agree with his plans of destruction. He even tells Shadow that he wants revenge on the world as well. But here's the thing: what does Mephiles actually intend to do once Shadow gives in to him and chooses to join his cause? You might be thinking,
But Danny, isn't it obvious? He will just destroy the world with Shadow.
No, he won't. You see, while Shadow has been lied to by some of his foes, they lie to Shadow about his own past and destiny, or at least try to bend it so it suits their own goal. They never actually lie about what they want to do. Mephiles, on the other hand, lies to Shadow about why he wants to punish the world, and doesn't even mention the fact that he seeks to reunite with Iblis in order to become Solaris. Also, Mephiles despises Shadow for sealing him within the Scepter of Darkness for 10 years. I think it's pretty clear that Mephiles just wants to kill Shadow. Sure, he could do it like how he killed Sonic, but let's just keep in mind that Mephiles actually hates Shadow, while he didn't have anything personal against Sonic. Every single person he interacts with in Sonic 06 is someone he doesn't care about, but Shadow is someone he hates. He doesn't just want to kill him, he wants to break him. To do that, he needs to make Shadow feel like a cornered animal who must fight back against the world. He wants to see the fear in Shadow's eyes, and he wants to feel like he finally has Shadow bowing down to him when 10 years before, he was the one being forced to bow down to Shadow. So quite simply, Mephiles wouldn't even have fun destroying the world with Shadow at his side. He would just kill him and then continue on with his actual quest to reunite with Iblis. Finally, let's take a look at the symbolism between these two. And I think the symbolism is important because Shadow has no other relationship like this one. Sonic 06 is set pretty much directly after Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow has become a GUN agent, so he is working for the people who he once saw as enemies he had to destroy. This is proof that he has moved on from his past grudges. He finally knows who he is and is content with it, unlike before where he was easily manipulated because he felt so lost. Then Mephiles comes along. Mephiles' natural form is that of a shadowy puddle, but he creates a physical body using Shadow's shadow. This is why he looks identical to him. While people nowadays see this as a cheap design, I think there's some depth to it that needs to be taken into account. Shadow is essentially looking back at himself whenever he looks at Mephiles. In fact, Mephiles' goals of ending the world are somewhat similar to the goals Shadow used to have. So it really is as if Shadow is facing a darker version of himself. Not only that, but Mephiles is constantly trying to dig away at Shadow's mind by reminding him of what happened in his past and what will inevitably happen in his future. He is trying to tempt Shadow in a devilish manner by trying to coax him into wanting to do evil, while also trying to get him to lower himself so that Mephiles is truly the powerful figure. It may as well be worth noting right now that Mephiles' name is a shortened version of the alternate name for the devil, Mephistopheles, who, in famous stories such as Dr. Faustus, would tempt others into doing evil and corrupts their minds with greed. So what does all of this mean? It means that Mephiles is Shadow's inner demon. Mephiles knows everything about Shadow, and even resembles him. His natural personality even seems to be similar to Shadow's old self. He tries to use lies in order to tempt Shadow, but when Shadow constantly fights back, no longer influenced by lies and temptation as he used to be, it shows that he truly is strong. He's the ultimate life form. Nothing will break him down anymore, not even himself. This is what makes Shadow's final scene with Mephiles incredibly powerful. Even if Mephiles is stronger than Shadow, Shadow is still able to fight back. He tells Mephiles that he will always fight, even if the world turns against him. The only thing I didn't like about the entire conclusion to Mephiles and Shadow's relationship was that there was no conclusion. If Shadow had been the one to finally defeat Mephiles, maybe during some story where Solaris was split back into its two halves, then that would be the perfect conclusion. It would show that Shadow could overcome and defeat his inner demons, and it would serve as a reminder to Mephiles that Shadow is still someone to fear. But I suppose it also makes sense that this conclusion never happened. An inner demon isn't something that should be destroyed. but something that should be kept under control. It's something you accept exists, no matter how hard you try to defeat it, but you have the power to overcome it without sinking to its destructive level. Which leads me to conclude this rant with one last point. Mephiles should return as Shadow's personal villain. Perhaps he won't be as menacing as he once was in Sonic 06, but the thing is, if Mephiles is going to symbolize Shadow's inner demon, then he shouldn't be gone. He should be someone who should surface every now and then in an attempt to overwhelm Shadow, possibly using things against him like his fondness of Rouge the Bat and Omega. But we don't want this relationship to suck the life out of itself, so here's the thing. Mephiles should be someone that Shadow, most of the time, has control over. Kind of like what happened to Loki in the MCU for a while. Mephiles becomes someone Shadow can speak to face, and Mephiles will only rise against him when the perfect opportunity arises. For example, if a new villain like Infinite recruited him and introduced a new power to him. The other reason I proposed this idea of bringing Mephiles back is because I think it's about time Shadow had some kind of clone-like rival of his own, an evil version of himself who sometimes tests him, just like how Sonic himself has Metal Sonic, a robotic duplicate who is always trying to better himself to prove that he is the real Sonic. Who knows, maybe Mephiles could even impersonate Shadow and frame him for certain events. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this topic. What do you think? Do you think Shadow's relationship with Mephiles symbolized something different? And do you think that there is a better villain Shadow has a connection with? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm Lord Danny, signing out.